So today's presentation is our colleague Joy Oria, who is doing beginning genealogy, and we're very glad to have Joy doing this because even if you have been doing genealogy for a really long time, it's always good to attend these, especially every once in a while and by other people, because you might get a hint. And then if you haven't been doing and you're new to research, this is the presentation for you to beginning to organize and figure out the method behind those names that you have in front of you. So here's a little bit about Joy. Joy is a native Houstonian, and she joined Clayton in 2015, where she coordinates the library outreach and programming. Thank you for those 3,000 people, Joy. Her genealogy research areas include the American Midwest and Mexico. She has a bachelor's degree in music from the University of Houston and graduated from the high school for the performing and visual arts in Houston. She previously has been employed as a park ranger and a zookeeper, and now enjoys the comforts of working indoors. And Joy will be speaking later this year at the We Are Cousins virtual conference and the Genealogical Society of Hispanic America conference, which is wonderful national conferences, and we're very proud of Joy to be doing that. And I am very grateful again for everything that she does for us. And I hope you enjoy this beginning presentation. And here is Joy. Joy, you have screen now.
All right, thanks, Sue. I appreciate that. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to Beginning Genealogy. And welcome to Clayton Library. We are a special collection library specializing in genealogy and part of the Houston Public Library. You may also be interested in our sister special collections, the African American Library at the Gregory School, specializing in African American history and culture, and the Houston Metropolitan Research Center, specializing in Houston and Texas history. These three special collections are located in beautiful historical buildings. The African American Library at the Gregory School is in the Edgar M. Gregory School, built in 1926, in its third iteration, and it served as the first public school for African Americans in Houston. The Houston Metropolitan Research Center is housed in the Julia Idison Building downtown, and is named after Houston's first librarian. It also opened in 1926 as the Central Public Library. The Clayton family donated their home and property to the Houston Public Library. And the Clayton family home, which you can see on the left there, was built in 1916 to 1917 in the Georgian Revival style. William Lockhart Clayton was a cotton trader, and he was one of the founders of Anderson, Clayton and Company, a cotton trading firm. And he was also a public servant. He's known for his contributions to the Marshall Plan, which provided aid to Western Europe following World War II. Well, together, William Lockhart Clayton and Susan Vaughn Clayton raised their family in this house. They both passed away in the 1960s, having donated their home to the library. And today, the library holds an international collection with material for all 50 U.S. states. It encompasses one city block, which you can see outlined in yellow. And it includes the Clayton House and outbuildings, then our parking lot there in the middle, and the more modern Clayton Library building at the bottom of the image. All right, so here's what we'll be talking about today. First steps. Your family's story is huge, and researching it can be overwhelming, so we'll cover some different ways to get started. We'll look at developing a research question, and this is to bring some focus and direction to your research, and also it will increase your research success. We'll look at some different record types, some of the more commonly found records, and ones that build a really great base for your research. And lastly, we'll look at some research tools to make you a stronger researcher. A good place to get started is to gather up what you already have. So this means looking around the house, talking to family members, going over boxes of old papers or photographs, or even other memorabilia, such as a quilt that might be embroidered with dates or names, or jewelry with inscriptions. And of course, ask other family members for what they might have or what stories they remember. And then go over all these items and stories, review them. You might discover something that you've previously overlooked, which I personally have done as I was trying to figure out my grandmother's birthplace and later realized it was sitting in my living room in a box of old papers from my father. So once you've gathered up this information, find a way to get organized. So you're going to find what works best for you. Maybe it's organizing your information online or in a software program or on paper or some combination thereof. We're going to look at a pedigree chart, a family group sheet, and a research log. So a pedigree chart is basically a family tree. You can do it on paper, you can do it online, and it's a way to organize your information. And the way these work are, let's say you're researching your own genealogy, you would be the person number 1, and then your father would be person number 2, and your mother would be person number 3. So traditionally, males go on the top line, females on the bottom line, and then below each person's name, you would write in their information, such as when and where they're born. So let's take a look at an example. Here's a pedigree chart that I started for Oprah Winfrey. So Oprah is number 1, number 2 is her father, Vernon, and number 3 is her mother, Vernita. And then start plugging in what information you know. Maybe you just know a year. That's fine, go ahead and write it in. If you have the exact birth date, that's great, put it in. Same thing for place. If you only know a state, that's fine, go ahead and write it down. And use pencil. So then as you discover more information, you can erase it and correct it. A family group sheet is showing information for one family. So it's one set of parents and their children. And it really is worth researching the whole family beyond your direct line of descent. Of course, we're interested in that direct line, like say your mother to your grandmother to your great-grandmother, etc. But they had other relatives, and it's worth researching all of them because sometimes it's the records of these collateral people that are going to reveal the information you're looking for. Do you have to use a family group sheet? No, you don't. I'm just showing you some different options, and you pick what works best for you. And a research log. Sometimes you're going to find what you need right away, but other times it's going to take a while. We're talking days, weeks, months, or even years. So using a log for notes is a really good way to keep track of what you've done. So you can see at this research log, at the top you would write your ancestor's name that you're researching or the family and your objective. Maybe you're trying to find out where this ancestor was born or who are this ancestor's parents. And then below that you're writing the different resources that you've looked at, the books, websites, microfilm, etc. and your findings and also where you found the source. And by keeping track of all this information, you don't have to rely on your memory and then you won't accidentally repeat things that you've already done. So keeping a research log is a really good habit to get into, and it's doing yourself a favor. All right, developing a research question. I'm going to share a personal story with you. I got a trial subscription to Ancestry.com, so I would enter names in the search boxes and click and see my list of search results. And next thing I know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm pretty sure I'm descended from Charlemagne. So I was all over the place, and I was skipping around in time and locations and ancestors because I had genealogy fever. But all those assumptions that I was making, were they correct? No, I had mistakenly identified several ancestors because I wasn't being methodical. I wasn't learning enough about one generation before I was leapfrogging to the next. So what's the solution? Developing a research question. You're going to form a goal and work at it until you either achieve it or you decide to put it on hold, in which case it'd be a good thing if you kept a research log. So this is thinking about who am I researching and what do I want to know about this person? Now obviously we want to know everything about all of our family members, but for the purpose of this exercise, we're just going to focus on one aspect at a time. And then think about what time period am I researching and where, and this is going to help you find records. So let's take a look at an example. I chose Peter Nemo, my 3 times great-grandfather. He was the end of the family tree. We knew he came from Scotland to Illinois in the 1800s, but he was the end of the line. So what I wanted to know was who were his parents? I knew that the time period I was dealing with was he was born in the early 1820s and died in the early 1890s. Where? Well, I know that as an adult, he was in central Illinois. As a young man, he lived in London, and that he was born in Glasgow. All right, so I've established my parameters here. So what are some possible strategies? How can I find out his parents' names? Maybe a death certificate in Illinois, or an obituary. maybe a marriage record in London or a birth record in Glasgow. I did find some information about his marriage in London, but it did not give me the names of his parents. Well, it turns out after his first wife died, he remarried 2 more times. And where he lived in Montgomery County, Illinois, they started keeping marriage records in 1821. So I was in luck because the record of his second marriage included the names of his parents. So I wrote to an Illinois archive who sent me a copy from the marriage register. So it's 1883 at the time of his second marriage. It gives his name and where he's residing. It gives his age and that he was born in Scotland. So this all matches up with what I know about Peter Nemo. And then there in the last column, it gives his parents' names, James Nemo and Elizabeth Fraser. And below her name, it says this is his second marriage. So developing a research question can be a very effective way to research. Pretty much any time your ancestor came into contact with an institution, such as a church or a government agency, whether it's federal, state, or local, a court, a school, a business, a record was created that are capturing moments in time. Now, it might be records that you're not expecting. I was not expecting Peter Nemo to have remarried. Some records are going to be more common and widespread, and we're going to look at a few. But I do want to remind you that in the beginning genealogy packet on our website, there is a 2-page checklist of various possible records that you can find on your ancestors. And among the most important are the vital records. These are records of births and marriages and deaths. And their availability really depends on the place. When did this place begin keeping vital records? So Texas, for example, began keeping vital records in 1903. Then you want to find out what are the privacy laws for this location. Are records not available until a certain amount of years after death? If they're not available online, how can I request a copy? You might have to prove that you're a relative or pay a fee. Well, birth certificates are great. They have a lot of information, but they're a relatively modern record, and they often have a lot of privacy laws around them. I looked at my family tree to share one with you, and I realized I didn't have any to show you. So I found a famous native Texan, Dan Rather, his birth certificate from when he was born in 1931 in Morton County, Texas. And there where it says full name of child, it says no name. It looks like his parents hadn't decided on a name when he was born. But below you can see information about his parents, Dan Irving Rather, and his mother, Veta Burrell Page. Now there are other records about births besides birth certificates. Church records, for example, are a great source. A lot of times they're baptism records. And sometimes the baptism records will give the age of the person, like they'll say 3 days old. This example that I'm showing you on the right is actually from Quaker Records in Pennsylvania, and it's a family register. So this is among the church records, and it's listing a family. So at the top we have the parents' names, Jacob and Phoebe Way, and below the names of their children and when they were born. So we see their firstborn was Alice Way. She was born the 9th of the 4th month of 1766. Now, just like with births, information about marriages can come from many sources. So the first bit of information that I found about this marriage between James Buchanan and Ann Stevens was this newspaper article. Mr. James G. Buchanan and Miss Ann Stevens of Montgomery County were married at the Globe Hotel Wednesday, October 6, by Vincent E. Foy, probate judge. Reading this newspaper article revealed to me why I couldn't find their marriage record. Everything that I knew about them had them placed in Montgomery County, Illinois. So that's where I was searching for their marriage record. But when I looked closely at this newspaper excerpt, I see that it was published in the Taylorville Democrat. Taylorville is in neighboring Christian County, Illinois, and it's only about 20 miles away from where they lived. But as it's in another county, the marriage record was in Christian County. And once I realized that, it was pretty quick finding this marriage record. Here we see, yep, they were married October 6, 1886. James G. Buchanan, it's giving his age, 37, and Miss Ann Stevens, who was 21. Death certificates, really, it varies from place to place how accessible death certificates are. Ancestry.com, for example, has Texas death certificates from 1903 to 1982. If you're looking for more recent death certificates, you would have to request them from the Bureau of Vital Statistics. Well, for this Illinois death certificate on the left from 1944, I had to go to the Illinois State Archives, find it on a roll of microfilm, and print out a copy. Now, death certificates can be really invaluable for providing birthplace of immigrant ancestors, if the informant knew that information. Well, the person who passed away here is Pauline Nemo, and her daughter was the informant, Edith Buchanan, and she knew where her mother was born. Excuse me if I mispronounce it, Frickenhaus, Germany. And I found out there was actually a Frickenhausen, so they just left off the N. And then it lists Pauline's father, Isaac Konsleiter. And with those two pieces of information, I picked up the family line in Germany in the records of Frickenhausen and was able to just keep going back generation by generation, actually 8 generations, into the 1600s. So it's very exciting, and I really appreciate Edith providing that information on Pauline's death certificate. Now, this other example on the right is a burial record from central Mexico of my great-great-grandfather, Luis Torres. So it's providing the date of burial, May 30th, 1899, his name, his age, he's 40, where he died, Rincon de Maria, the cause of his death, wounds, and his marital status, he was a widower. A big misconception about probate records is that your ancestor had to be wealthy. The truth is, people of every economic level can be found in probate records. And 2 terms to know when it comes to probate that are really important are testate, which means you left a will, and intestate. It means you didn't. Well, I had an ancestor who died intestate in 1875, and he definitely was not wealthy, but there were over 30 pages in his probate packet, some of which is just correspondence about where he's going to be buried and who's going to pay for it. The most valuable page in this packet was probably the page on the left, which lists his heirs. So it's naming all of his children, including his daughters, with their married names. So that's a good way to connect daughters who have married to their fathers. U.S. federal censuses are definitely records you want to look for. They were taken every 10 years, beginning in 1790. And in the 1790 census, which you can see in the example, only the heads of the households were listed, and their family members were enumerated in columns by gender and age. So you don't get to know their names. And what we find is that questions or the information taken on censuses, it varied each time. The 1850 census was the first to actually list every member of the household. So instead of getting these columns with numbers, you get everybody's name. The 1870 census was the first to include formerly enslaved people. So that's really a landmark census for researching enslaved ancestors, looking at where they were living and who was living around them, who was their community. The 1890 census was mostly destroyed, unfortunately, in a fire. About 6,000 names have survived, but the rest of it is a wash. The 1940 census is the most recently available, as there is a 72-year privacy rule. Now, the 1950 census will become available in April 2022. And these records really are cornerstone records. You want to find every census that you think your ancestors should be in. They provide a wealth of information, and again, each census asks different questions, and you don't want to miss out any of that information. They're also possibly the most accessible records, as they've been digitized, they've been indexed, and they're available on multiple websites. Here's an example of the 1870 census. It lists all the members of a household, but it doesn't tell us the relationship to each other. The 1880 census will, but not this one. So William Buchanan on the top line there, he was a person I was researching. He's living next door to a Washington Buchanan. Turns out that's his brother. Now, often the way families were listed was you'd have the head of the household first. So it's either, the husband or a widow or a widower. Then the spouse, the wife, would come second, and then the children in descending order of age. Then you usually have servants or other family members next. In Washington's family, we see his family members. We see Mary, Newell, and Eliza. Then we see an Alfred Boone and a James Buchanan who both work on the farm. It turns out James Buchanan is actually Washington's nephew, and he's William's son. Very often on the census, family members are living near or next door to each other. So when you do find a family, one of your families you're researching on the census, look at all the people around them. Take a look at the census page before and after them, or even more pages, and you're going to discover more relatives, more often than not. I'll confess that when I started out in genealogy, I didn't really expect to find too much about my ancestors in newspapers. They're rural farmers, they're not famous people, but I was really wrong. Newspapers are not just for the big cities and famous people. Newspapers for big cities might be easier to find sometimes, but even small towns, communities, rural areas had newspapers. Some newspapers are written for a particular religion, ethnicity, language, or occupation. Now, of course, we expect things like wedding announcements and birth announcements, obituaries. There's also quite a bit of social news, such as Mrs. Smith is visiting Miss Johnson from Galveston. Items of interest to the local people. You might also see notices of people trying to find other people, especially African Americans who have been separated by slavery, or immigrants, or people who moved out west to the frontier and they're trying to connect with family members. So let's look at these examples. Notice, Cinda White desires to hear the whereabouts of her children, Sally, Jane, and Hercules. Hercules was sold in Atlanta by Jack Wallace about 3 years ago and taken to Tennessee. The girls was sold to James McDaniel in Thomaston, Georgia about the same time. And then there's a contact address. The example on the right is about a barn fire, which doesn't sound extremely exciting, but this article mentions that the farm is known as the old George Waldham farm. Well, that was my ancestor. And then this article tells me where this farm is located. It's about 3 miles east and 1 mile south of Nashua. So now I know exactly where George Waldham's farm was. So that's why that article is interesting to me. Now, many newspapers have been digitized and can be found on websites, both free websites and some that require payment. Other newspapers are not digitized and may only be found on microfilm or in print, in archives or libraries, like the special collection libraries I mentioned earlier, the African American Library at the Gregory School and the Houston Metropolitan Research Center. Now, Chronicling America is a free website by the Library of Congress. You can search the digitized newspapers for a person, place, or event. But I also like to use their newspaper directory. It's shown in the highlighted box. And this is a directory of newspapers published in the U.S. since 1690. So it's basically showing you what newspapers existed, when they ran, and ideally it will show you what libraries or archives currently hold it. Another free website with digitized newspapers is Portal to Texas History. It has a Texas digital newspaper program. And many states have some sort of similar digital newspaper program going on. So I encourage you to look for that for the states you're researching. County histories are these really big, beautiful books that were popular in the mid to late 1800s. And they provided local history for a county, biographies of the people who lived there, information about local industries, community members, area churches, etc. Now, people might have paid to be included. It's kind of like when I was in high school, I got an ad in the mail that said, pay this fee and we'll include you in Who's Who in American high schools. So it was somewhat similar to that. You could pay a fee and provide your own biography. Things like a biography of yourself, maybe a photo or an illustration of yourself. But there's also information about just how the community developed. So I found a biography for Washington Buchanan. He was my ancestor's brother. And this biography provided a lot of information, including their parents' names, their siblings, the family migration history. They started out in Pennsylvania and ended up in Ohio. It even gives their mother's maiden name and the information about her father. It's a lot of information that I really appreciated finding. And there in the middle, we see an illustration of James Buchanan's farm. I mean, how cute is that? There on the right, there's an example of a lodge in the community and the people who were in the lodge. So a lot of these county histories, since they were published so long ago, they're out of copyright, and you can find them digitized on a lot of websites like Internet Archive, FamilySearch, HathiTrust, Google Books, even Ancestry.com. And at Clayton Library, we have quite a few of these books. So you can just go to the shelf, the county that you're researching, and you may find one. Directories are a great substitute for that 1890 census that got destroyed. Directories often use abbreviations, so you want to look at the beginning of the directory to see if there's some sort of explanation of the abbreviations. Now, we tend to think of directories as a resource for large cities, but there's also specialty directories, as seen here. Example on the left is from the Prairie Farmers Reliable Directory of Farmers and Breeders for Montgomery County, Illinois. These were really popular in the Midwest. So I found an entry from my ancestor, my great-grandfather, Ray Buchanan, and it's pretty amazing the amount of information in this small little entry. It gives his wife's name, Edith Nemo, so it's giving me his wife's maiden name, which is a big deal. Unfortunately, they did misspell it, but I know it's supposed to be Nemo. And then it names their children, Juanita, Forrest, and it should be Bernie, but instead it's misspelled, where they lived. And then here's where it's good to know what the abbreviations are. T160A means Ray is a tenant farmer on 160 acres that belonged to William Nemo, his father-in-law. And William Nemo bought the land in 1887. So really that's an amazing amount of information to find in a directory. The example on the right is from the Red Book of Houston, a compendium of social, professional, educational, and industrial interest of Houston's colored population. It's from 1915. So with segregation, you may find separate publications like this. And in this example, it's listing schools for African Americans, the principals, the teachers, what they taught, and their home addresses. And there at the bottom, we can see the Gregory School. When we think of immigration records, we tend to think of passenger lists. These are more reliably found in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There were not as many passenger lists for the early 1800s. You may end up having to rely on a secondary source because passenger lists were not required for a very long time. But if you do find your ancestor on a passenger list, take a good look at the other passengers, as often people from a community immigrated together. So a bunch of people in this one little village in Germany might decide, let's go to America, and they all travel together, even if they're not related. On this passenger list from 1850, it was from London to New Orleans. Whoever filled out the passenger list made these very helpful brackets so you could tell who was traveling together. So the highlighted excerpt I have here, Richard Lawrence and his wife Sarah, they came with their son-in-law Peter Nemo and his wife Frances, who was their daughter, and then their other daughters, Mary Ann, Harriet, Eliza, Ann, and one mystery person, Eliza Hill. And we see it gives their ages and their genders and the occupations for the males. But immigration records could also be border crossing records, like this is my step-grandfather from 1937. It's a really great record. It provides his birthplace, Monclova, Mexico. It also gives his mother's name, Anastasia Perez. And it tells me she's a widow. For more examples of immigration records, refer to the checklist in the handout. Things like naturalization papers, passports, oaths of allegiance, and so forth. All right, now we're ready for research tools. Catalogs, FamilySearch Research Wiki, the library website, the library itself, and library staff. Let's take a look at them one at a time. When you're looking at genealogy websites like FamilySearch or Ancestry, take a look at their catalogs. You want to find out what do they actually have, because is what I want here or not? So for FamilySearch, you can go to Search and then Catalog. And I like to do place searches. So here we're on the catalog page, and there's a search bar in the middle that says place. And this is where you can enter a town, a county, a state, country, etc. to see what's available. And this is important because not everything on FamilySearch is indexed. When a book has an index, for example, you look up a name or place and it tells you what page to go to. So when digitized records are indexed, you can enter a name and get a list of results. When digitized records are not indexed, you're not going to get them in your search results. Instead, you can find them by going to the catalog and doing a search. So I'm going to do a search for Montgomery County, Illinois, and see what FamilySearch has for that location. All right, well, FamilySearch breaks things down by category. So you look for the category you're interested in and click on it. So I'm interested in directories. It shows me there's 2 items there. So let's see what they are. The first one, it says Pana, Illinois City Directory. I'm not interested in that. The next one, it says Prairie Farmers Directory of Montgomery County. Well, great, I want to look at that, so I click on it. The entry for it comes open, and in the notes it says to view a digital version of this item, click here. So the Prairie Farmers Guide is available on FamilySearch, but it's not indexed. So if I typed my ancestor's name in the search boxes, the Prairie Farmers Guide is not going to show up in the results. But I can't find it in the catalog, and I can still view a digital version. Ancestry.com. 2 clicks on the word search will take you to this page. And you can use the map to click on a state or country. You can move the map around to see holdings for the location that way. Or you can use the categories on the right to narrow down what you're looking for. So if I click on Texas, it shows me all the collections it has for Texas. So it's showing me Texas death certificates, 1903 to 1982. So if I'm on Ancestry and I'm looking for a death certificate for 1985, and I start to get really frustrated that I can't find it, well, this is telling me why I'm not going to be able to find it, because I don't have it. You can also go to Search and then Card Catalog, and there'll be filters on the left that you can use to narrow down. You can click on a category, you can click on a location, time period, etc. And I recommend looking at the catalogs to find out if what you're looking for is even there. You know, if it is, you can go directly to it. And if you don't see it, you'll know it's not there. So in the Ancestry card catalog, I used some of the filters. I narrowed it down to Texas. I narrowed it down to death records. And there I came up with Texas death certificates. I clicked on it, and now I'm exclusively searching within Texas death certificates. That's a really great way to narrow down when you're looking for something specific. Then you're not wading through everything else that Ancestry has on their website. The FamilySearch Research Wiki is free. It's great, quick learning, quick resource. You can type in a topic or a place. So the way you get to it is you're on FamilySearch.org. You click on Search and then Research Wiki. So I did a search for Harris County, Texas. Right, so we did Search, Research Wiki. I searched for Harris County, and here's some snippets of the information it provides. So it's showing me when Harris County began keeping certain record types. So if I'm looking for birth records for Harris County, they're saying they started in 1903. Marriage records, 1836. The other snippet is a description of other record sources like probate. It says probate in Texas was kept by the probate clerk in each county courthouse. And then also offers online collections that you can search. So a great resource. HoustonLibrary.org. At the top of the page, there's a search bar. You can search our catalog. So if you have a title or an author you want to look up, you can plug that in there. You can also do a broad search for a topic or a place. And you can use the library's subscriptions to genealogy or newspaper databases like Ancestry.com, Library Edition, Heritage Quest, MyHeritage, Newspaper Archive. And the way you get to these is you click on the word research. These different categories come up. You can click on genealogy or newspapers and other news sources. You can also apply for a library card on our website. It is free to Texas residents, and it's available to out-of-state residents for a fee of, I believe, $40 a year or $20 for 6 months. Clayton Library. If you're able to visit us, please do. Our material is in open stacks, so you're welcome to browse, or staff can assist you in finding material. Our material on the first floor is organized geographically. Our international collection is going to start with Albania and ends with the West Indies. And then the material for the U.S. states Starts with Alabama and ends with Wyoming. And then within each state, you're going to find material organized by general. So these are books that apply to the whole state or to multiple counties. And then you'll find material organized by county. So books that are county specific. So what sort of books are these? Well, many are transcriptions or abstracts of original records. So here's some sample titles. Marriages of Harris County, Texas, 1857 to 1880. Obituaries of Buncombe County, North Carolina, 1915 to 1920. 1835 tax lists of St. Helena Parish, Louisiana. And then, of course, you'll find those county histories that we were talking about earlier. If you go up to the second floor, you'll find our microfilm collection and our family histories. So these are books that people have written about their own genealogy. Ideally, a good family history is going to cite their sources, but some family histories may just be written versions of passed on oral history. Clayton Library staff, we each have our own areas of expertise, and we may offer different suggestions or resources, so feel free to talk to more than one of us. There are many ways to get in touch with us, and you don't have to have a library card, and you don't have to be a Houston resident to use our services. Come visit us in person. Give us a call. Send us an email or a letter, or we can even arrange a Zoom call. Quick review. To get started, gather what you have and talk with family members. Then get organized. Find what works best for you and stick with it. If you keep up with your notes and your documentation, your future self will thank you. Develop a research question to direct your research. Focus on a particular ancestor and narrow down the what, when, and where to lead you to the answer. The records that can answer your research question are numerous. They are not only online, but also in libraries and archives. The answers may also lie in records of collateral relatives, if not of direct relatives. And use the research tools we discussed. Search the catalogs of online databases and libraries so you can go directly to what you want and avoid spending time looking for something that isn't there. Use the FamilySearch Research Wiki for learning, and use library staff. That's what we're here for. And with that, thank you for your time. Good luck in your research, and remember, Clayton Library staff is here to help. We'd love to see you if possible or hear from you. Thanks again.
Joy, thank you so much. And when Joy mentioned your future self, we do that. We talk about that where the example that I use is it's like, well, I'll use the example I used the other day, Joy. When you put your laundry down on the bed to fold it then, because your future self will thank you, so you don't have to go back and do it again. So when we talk about our future self doing things, we talk about, write down the citation, write down the book where you came from, so, where you're getting the information from, right, Joy? So
yeah, a lot of this presentation was just me trying to warn y'all not to do the errors that I've done.
We find that is what happens a lot. It's the practice what you preach type of thing sometimes. I wanted to ask you a question. So what happens when you have conflicting sort of evidence, and which document might you believe, or what should you do if you have that conflicting evidence? So the example is my grandmother on my grandfather's naturalization. It says that she was born in 1910. My grandmother always told me that she was born in 1912. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question.
And the census also was different.
Okay. Well, okay, as genealogists, normally we put more weight in the document that was created closest to the event. So like I would trust, say, a baptism record more than a death certificate for an accurate birth date or approximate time of birth. Another thing to consider, although I understand this is more modern, is that this might surprise us, but birthdays really weren't as big as they are now. There wasn't a sort of accuracy, like right now I have my social security number memorized. We know that sort of information, but it just wasn't as common in the past. Let's see, you said there was a naturalization record and a census record, and what else was there?
Well, and then just my grandmother telling me, I mean, I
Oh,
can
her
tell
oral
you,
story.
I can give you, yeah, I can give you after you're done with some
Okay.
ideas,
Sure.
yeah, the whole story. Well, I mean, what ultimately happened, as you mentioned, I mean, the record that happened the closest to the event, or who gave the information is important. Like a death record, we don't know who gave the information and might not remember. So I actually did find her when she passed away, and I probably could have written for it while she was still alive, but when she passed away, in her safe deposit box it was actually the midwife certificate. So that solved the mystery.
Well, like my dad actually was a year older than he knew for most of his life. And that's a strange story, but basically his mother kept his real birth a secret because she left her husband, the father, and started a new life. So, I mean,
Oh, wow.
that was in the 1940s. So that was
Mhm.
quite a shock for him when he
Yeah,
found that out.
I bet. Well, let's bring Mitch. Do you have any questions or any comments? We did have some comments in the chat, and I put some stuff in the chat while we were asking. You want to go through those and see what we found in the chat, just to sort of recap?
Yes, we do have a few things. Thank you, Joy. That was a great presentation. Lisa Tate asked early on if it's possible to get a copy of the research log that you showed. Do you have a source for documents like that?
You know what whenever I want the research log, you know what I do? I type in genealogy research log. I do a Google search on that. And it's always one of the first results. It's on FamilySearch.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I think Sue posted that as well.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
In the chat, mentioned getting it from FamilySearch. So again, the importance of saving your chat log from each of these webinars. There is a link that Sue posted for the charts and forms category at FamilySearch. Some of these things can be kind of hard to find at FamilySearch, so having a direct link is very useful. Yeah.
And how do we save the chat, Mitch? How do we save the chat?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. If you look at the bottom of the chat window, you'll see a 3 little dots called the More menu. You click on the More menu, and one of the options it's supposed to give you is Save Chat, and that will save the chat as a text file on your hard drive. Now, whether exactly where it'll save it, it may, depending on how you're set up, it may ask you where to save it. It may save it directly to your documents folder, but that's how it's supposed to work. Okay, thank you for reminding me to point that out. Now, I have a comment from Elizabeth talking about small town newspapers. She says that she wished more were digitized. She Elizabeth said that she recently contacted her hometown library, and the staff looked back through the microfilm newspapers and sent her an article and a picture of her father when her father had enlisted in the Army at age 18. So that's something that they probably would never have seen without having those newspapers digitized, or at least microfilmed, and having the library look back.
Yeah, that's a great find. It's very exciting.
Yeah. I'll just say that we do offer a reference thing ourselves, a reference service here at Clayton, where you can send a simple request to us. So we can't do your whole family tree, but send a request to cla.reference@houstontx.gov, and maybe we can put that in the chat in a minute. And we do reference questions from there. Okay, as following up on newspapers, Andrea is asking if the newspaper websites are in the presentation handout.
They are. If you go to houstonlibrary.org, click on research, and then all those categories come up, like genealogy. When you click on genealogy, they should be listed there. So even the free websites we have listed on the genealogy page, just because they're so great.
Great. Yeah, good. Thank you. And Sue, you may have stepped in on this. Rhonda is asking, where will I be able to find the recording of this program?
So the Houston Public Library has a YouTube channel, and it will be uploaded to the YouTube channel. It has to go through some processes, editing, and then as a governmental entity, it also has to go through other departments inside the library department. So I would say, give us a month or so, and then, continue to go to subscribe to the HPL YouTube channel. There are some things up there already, some presentations, not only from us, but from the Houston Metropolitan Research Center also. So go there and then you can drill down. It's the Historic Research Center's part of the YouTube channel.
Okay. Good. Thank you. And now Jack T gives us some helpful information. He says if you are on Zoom, speaking about saving the chat log, if you're using Zoom on a Mac computer, you can normally find the chat log. It's saved in the Zoom folder under Documents on your Mac. So you would go to Documents and then to Zoom, and you would find the chat log saved there. So that's about it. I don't have any other questions. I didn't see anything else show up in the chat log. Rhonda Fliss says the same thing. The chat went to Documents, Zoom. So that's where to look for it. We do these, often, and I notice a lot of new names, here. So we appreciate, if this is your first time again, joining us. If it's not, we appreciate your support. I'd like to, as Joy mentioned, and Mitch mentioned also, please feel free to give us a call. And the phone number is 832-393-2600, 832-393-2600, between the hours of 10 to 4 on Tuesdays through Saturdays. Ask us questions, ask us how you think you should proceed. Just by all means, this is what we're here for, as Joy specifically mentioned. We're very glad that you did join us for the beginning presentation. And again, as Joy mentioned, we have a presentation coming up on Ancestry and FamilySearch. And we know that this overwhelming task of working on family history can be overwhelming, but remember that even if you're not in Texas, you're more than welcome to call us, and we are more than happy to help you. Again, you want to look and see what kind of books we have, you use our library catalog at houstonlibrary.org. The upcoming events, Jack, if you go to houstonlibrary.org, and across the top, there's a link there that says events. If you click on that, and you can then put in the word genealogy, and up will come the calendar of all our upcoming events, and you can register for those. So at houstonlibrary.org, click on the word events, all events, put in genealogy, and then they will all come up. We would love to have you join us. So if there are no other comments, James mentions putting a 1 in front of the number to make that call like in the old days for long distance, 832-393-2600. Please do give us a call. And Joy, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. And thank you again, all of you, for joining us. And we hope to see you again.